Dorian is both a very queer retelling of the Picture of Dorian Gray, but also overlays it with what Oscar Wilde was going through in his life after it came out, dealing with his own sexuality and what that meant governmentally, legally.
The first time I read this piece, I was really bowled over, and I kind of didn't understand why it was working on me like that or how it was working on me. And I think what it is most successful in doing is keeping the sort of the gothic heart of Dorian, which is, you know, it's kind of that gothic horror. There's a lot of haunting and a lot of emptiness and a lot of loneliness, and infusing that with pride and joy and celebration and life. And so I think sometimes Gothic stories can have this empty feeling, and Dorian acknowledges that emptiness and then infuses it with life and beauty. It's really complicated, it's really messy, and it's really human.
For gender, Victorian society had a very rigid idea of the correct performance of gender, to get all Butler on you, for both men and women. Women were kind of expected to be very innocent and dainty, uneducated. It was unbecoming of women to be even seen in public, much less to have jobs, which is a problem when you're a woman in theater. Men were expected, especially around the 1870s, to be very physically strong and rugged and homeowners. And kind of in this time of rising paranoia around queerness, you see people being punished for not performing kind of the expectations of their gender.
This story is about being free, liberation, identity, persona, what it means to be in a world that doesn't accept you and how you remedy that.
Yes, but I'm most excited about this piece and the queerness behind this piece and how unashamedly queer it is, especially in this time right now that we're in. I think it's really important for people to see that, and I am very lucky and very excited to be able to play a role that I feel like I'm able to genuinely speak from the heart about. And I think it's important to speak out and to continue to be bold and unashamedly queer in these times where people feel like they have to be the safest, because that's the only real way of resistance, is showing them, you know, love again in community and art. So,
unfortunately, the political climate that we're in, Dorian is more relevant than ever. I think if, other than having fun, I want the audience to leave remembering that history repeats itself, and if we don't remember that and fight for our own freedoms, then we're just doomed to repeat it.
First up, Oscar Wilde, the guy himself. Oscar Wilde was a dramatist, poet, and wit from Ireland, from a very well-educated family. His father was a medic, his mother was a journalist. He was very prominent in the decadent and aesthetic movements. He believed in art for art's sake, basically like art does not exist to do something, it just exists. He was a controversial figure kind of throughout his career, both for his philosophies, which contradicted Victorian ideas of like stories must have morals, etc., his off-putting demeanor, and his perceived femininity. He married Constance Lloyd, had 2 children, Cyril and Vivian, while having active male lovers throughout their marriage. One such lover was Bosie Douglas, who would encourage Oscar into sort of the world of rent boys and partying and gambling, and their relationship would eventually lead to his prosecution for gross indecency. After such prosecution, he was imprisoned for 2 years in Reading jail, and then after his release, died 3 years later in Paris.
playing the roles of Dorian and Bosie, who was Oscar Wilde's lover, and a fun little drag role. And I'm very excited about all of them. They're very different. But I do love how all of them are just like terrible people, but they don't think that they're terrible. So like, it's hard to really understand for them, like from their experience, why bad things keep happening to them.
What excites me the most is the challenge. This will be a show that is totally outside of the box from what I'm usually cast for as an actor. I'm usually the boy next door. I'm usually the singer. This will break those boundaries without giving too much away. My characters are very exciting.
It's a really good script. This piece excites me because it's a beautifully constructed piece of drama. It's brilliant in the ways it plays with time, it's almost like a pastiche or a collage of different moments of queerness throughout history. And it's just really fun, very witty.
I hope audiences take away a sense of community from the show and recognizing that community and inner beauty is the truest form of art.
It's so important to be a part of a community because I think a lot of times people try to do it on their own, and when we are left in our own minds, that's when I think we don't give ourselves the opportunity to grow, the opportunity to heal, the opportunity to share ideas. So being in a community, especially in Buffalo, especially with our theater community, there's an option, there's a release to be your unadulterated self, to be your unapologetically yourself. And you don't get that a lot, especially outside of Buffalo again.
You know, I feel like this is actually it's really in line with the mission of Irish Classical, which is to produce Irish plays and classical plays. You know, Oscar Wilde was one of the most famous Irish writers to ever live. And so we're looking at him and one of his most famous works, but also his life and who he was as a person. Dorian by Phoebe Eclair-Powell and Owen Horsley is a North American premiere. It's running at Irish Classical from March 28th to April 13th, and you can get tickets at irishclassical.com.